Hello and welcome to Universal Design for Learning Across Dimensions, from teacher preparation to accessible IEP meetings. I'm Megan Gross, SIP Program Specialist, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this session. This session is presented by Dr. Eileen Ivins and Viviana Navarro. We want to offer you a few logistics for this session. It will be recorded and archived on the conference page for 1 month. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the closed captioning button on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. The interpretation icon in the same area will provide access to Spanish translation. We will ensure the ASL interpreters are spotlighted along with the PowerPoint and presenter. Please ensure your volume is muted to avoid background distractions while presenters speak. We encourage you to engage with others in the chat, and when possible, keep your camera on so we can see your faces. And with that, Dr. Ivins and Viviana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Megan, and thanks for giving us a chance to present some of our collective work. We are going to introduce ourselves before we start. My name is Eileen Ivins, and I'm a faculty member in special education at Alder Graduate School of Education.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Viviana Navarro. I'm an ed specialist at Da Vinci Communications in El Segundo. I am currently a case manager for 10th graders, and I'm not only an Alder alumni, I am also an Alder mentor this year. I'm happy to be here.
Here's just a brief agenda of how we've structured our time for the next hour, and thank you so many of you for joining us. We'll spend a little bit of time setting the table with teacher residency and how the model of a teacher residency really enables this connection between theory and practice. And then we'll turn it to my colleague Viviana, who will talk to you all about a practice that she developed that centers access to special education for students and families. And then please collect questions, and I believe Megan is monitoring questions in the chat because we'll make sure to spend 10 minutes addressing some questions at the end. So we'll just zoom out. What is Alder Graduate School of Education? Alder Graduate School of Education is a teacher residency, and in this model of training teachers, we really rely on a partnership between our institution, our Graduate School of Education, and our K-12 partners. And so in this sort of this dark purple partnership zone, we are training and preparing teachers to step into the classroom with hundreds of hours of experience in classrooms with what you might call student teaching. And it allows us to do something very, very special, which is to really think about those connections between the big ideas in education and the theories and the practices that make up sort of the creative, brilliant craft of teaching. It's just a little bit more about the residency model. The residency model of teacher training is immersive. It's also 12 months long, so it's a year-long program. And in a residency, we train pre-service teachers under the guidance of one experienced mentor teacher. Teachers who step into this program, or pre-service teachers rather, their tuition is often subsidized with an annual stipend from the state. And we call them residents. So far, there's been some excellent research that looks at the impact of this teacher training model. So residency graduates have higher retention rates, are found to have higher retention rates. I'm sorry, I have to move some boxes here. Than teachers who enter through other pathways. Oops. On average, the pool of residents is more racially diverse than teachers entering through other pathways. And here in California, our state has made a huge investment in this design and this model of teacher training. Over the last 6 years, almost $700 million have been invested, which is the largest investment in residencies across the nation. And just within this 4-year period between 2019 and 2022, 774 residents have graduated from these grant-funded California residency programs. And one of the hallmarks of the teacher residency model and one of the specific intended outcomes is to diversify the teacher workforce. Residency programs prepare about 1 in 10 new teachers, and 65% of residency graduates are teachers of color. Now that outpaces the state's 2018 to 2019 teacher average of 31%. So we're looking at a resident being 2 times more likely of being a teacher of color entering the teacher workforce. So let's talk specifically about Alder and our program that I teach in and that Viviana received her credential and master's in. So this immersive 1-year program starts in the summer. So the residents take 4 classes in the summer. They are full day classes and they are back to back, stacked. So that's when a full immersion begins, but it builds in the fall when they enter their classroom placement. And so they are both in the classroom, teaching under the guidance of an experienced mentor, and they are in coursework as well. So now they're in both roles as graduate student and as a teacher in the classroom. It continues through the spring. And as they move through the months of the spring, they're taking on more responsibility, all the while engaging in coursework. And I will go into the schedule for that in a minute. So like a typical week for a resident will be 4 days in the classroom with the mentor teacher and gaining that hands-on experience. Here in this image, you can see a resident with their mentor co-teaching their class. And then one of those days, typically Thursday, they will go to a class called seminar. And in that class, they'll reflect on their experiences in their placement, and they will thread some of the theories and the big ideas that they're learning in their class, in their coursework, with some of the experiences and the practices that they see in their placement. We also have something called Course Week, and during these weeks, our residents are in graduate level courses for 3 days. They go back to their seminar with their cohort, where they reflect on their learning and they make plans for their next reentry into placement. And then on Friday, they go back into the placement and teach. This is a picture from a course that I was recently teaching on math methods for students with disabilities. So the reason why I spent a few slides describing the model is because the model specifically matters when we're asking our pre-service teachers, our residents, to really think about the relationship between theories and their practices. We want to emphasize this iterative thinking between theory and practice because one of the hopes of our program is that teachers become judicious consumers of educational trends. We want our teachers to be agentive, creative, and always ground their decisions in their why. and in their philosophy of education. We also are hopeful that our teachers bring their cultural and linguistic identities into their classrooms, knowing that the residency model is recruiting and training high quality teachers from diverse backgrounds. So with that being said, now that I've explained the model a little bit, we're going to go into a specific example that will tee up Viviana's presentation. So I was thinking, like, how could I really show what theory to practice looks like in a way that like sets up the sharing that Viviana is about to do? So I actually went back to the class that I taught Viviana in, and it was back in spring of 2022. And it was a class on writing individualized education plans, or IEPs. So in this class, we read a great article by Audrey Trainer on cultural and linguistic diversity in parent advocacy in special education. So here's just a visual of it. There's a hyperlink if you'd like to link to it as well. It's a great one. I don't teach it anymore, but this kind of made me think maybe I should bring it back. So in our class, the residents discussed the article and they identified some of the barriers experienced by culturally and linguistically diverse families. And I went back to the lesson plan actually, and I found this excerpt had been pulled by a resident for discussion. And I'm going to read it aloud to you because this directly leads into Viviana's portion. How do parents come to successfully challenge the structures that have effectively prevented equal opportunity in schools for their children with disabilities? Strength and efficacy in advocacy seem to stem from a combination of specialized cultural capital, i.e. knowledge of IEP content and parents' rights, and social capital in the form of relationships between key players like extended family or other parents with children with disabilities, teachers and disability service providers and administrators. So in the class, we had an inquiry into this idea. This was posed by the students, the residents, and they took some time to brainstorm, and this is embedded in the article too, some strategies for ways to make the IEP process more accessible when parents are in positions when they would like to advocate for their students who don't have this cultural capital or social capital. And they thought about how can we increase the social capital or cultural capital of the families that we collaborate with so that they can have more access to the IEP process and thus advocate. So then the residents completed an assignment. And in this assignment, they had to facilitate an IEP meeting. And I know it's very, very small. So here is one of the specific prompts. Videotape yourself explaining FAPE. FAPE is free and appropriate public education to a student's parents in a culturally responsive and family-friendly manner. So they went and recorded videotapes using a videotape portion, like a rehearsal, if you will, of an IEP meeting. Viviana, my colleague who's co-presenting with me today, she did great. Here is the feedback. I had to go way back into my archives to find the feedback that I gave her. And when I saw this, I was just kind of moved. And I'll read it aloud. Viviana, exemplary work as always. I love the way that you make the PLP, or present level of performance, and the goals more as a conversation. I can imagine families are comforted by your tone and your pacing. Just highlighting here that tone and pacing are both strategies that were embedded in the conversation that we had in class. And you can see this is pasted from my comments from February 2022. So I went into this example to sort of demonstrate this connection between theory and practice. We are hoping that through the model that our teachers are trained in combination with some of these intentional assignments, the choices in the readings, the rehearsal assignments, and their work under the guidance of an excellent mentor, that our teachers, our graduates, they become creative agents of change. And through the model and through the work that we have done on sort of the coursework side and the clinical placement side, teachers have structured opportunity to practice solutions that are grounded in theory. And I want to make sure to honor and give flowers to Viviana's mentor and all the mentors that are really the sort of heart and soul of the program, because mentors are modeling how to navigate all sorts of dilemmas and how to develop creative solutions, particularly when it comes to our special education scenarios like case management
That's
and
okay.
IEP development and collaboration. And with that, I am going to pass it on to Viviana.
Thank you, Dr. Ivins. I just want to add that Alder has been an amazing experience for me. Truly, what you hear is what you get with this program. I can't emphasize enough how much I loved it and enjoyed being able to go to school to this amazing program and then be in placement every day. The impact is something beyond what I could describe, and the learning experience was amazing. So I'm going to be focusing a lot on what we what we learned through the UDL framework. So UDL it stands for Universal Design Learning. And if you're not familiar, it's a framework that looks at engagement representation and then focuses on action and expression. So we're looking to see how students can access information in a way that draws engagement, allows them to have different exposure to different things of interest that is presented to them in different forms, be it visual, auditory, and then also allows them to present what they've learned in different modalities so that we can assess them in a way that is equal and allows them to express what they've learned. There's tons of research and so much that I could speak on UDL. But I will focus it more so on the application of it and what I was able to do with this framework to give accessibility not just to students, but particularly to the families and to facilitate an IEP that feels meaningful and inclusive. I think sometimes when we would learn about the UDL and hear its purpose, you're kind of like, duh, that makes sense. But then when you're like, how do I actually apply it? How could I be creative to use different strategies and implement it? That's where it gets really fun. And that's where I'm really grateful that I was able to be in Alder, where I was in this placement every day of the week. I got to see the ins and outs and really pick up on things that I was like, maybe we could improve this, or here's where we could redefine it. And so I want to share with you guys an aha moment for me that came about really in an anxious time. I was presenting my first IEP, and I was also translating in Spanish for the family. And so as I'm doing this, I'm reading the IEP documents, which if you've seen could be 20 pages or longer. And I'm saying it to her in Spanish. She's looking confused. So am I. I'm sweating. And then I just realized like so there's a disconnect here. This process doesn't feel genuine and it feels very isolating to the mom. She was raising very valid concerns. She was very open to working with us, and was asking about services, questions that seemed like in the high school setting, she should maybe know or be familiar with. But I think there was many factors that really hurt that communication piece, including the language barrier. No one in this in the team that I was working with, my mentor or the other two case managers, spoke Spanish, and so I was kind of like a coming in bilingual and navigating and trying to see. And I just realized there has to be a better way. And so in using UDL, I decided we're going to give this a shot. And I began to present IEPs using an Google template to provide the visual access to our families to be able to sort of scaffold the IEP process. Again, I know we have a lot of educators here. In that moment, I felt like I wish I could pause this IEP and just speak directly with this parent without feeling like the heaviness of the formality in some cases, and be able to help her understand the questions she was asking regarding like counseling the student had in his IEP. So that disconnect was coming from somewhere where I wanted to get to the bottom of that. How are we in high school and this parent still isn't sure what services the student's getting or hasn't understood fully what the IEP means. And so on here you will see that we've linked an IEP example of the template and it's also on the QR code. So using UDL, I wanted to address barriers for the multilingual families. I wanted to be able to provide a more engaging IEP. Again, scaffolded in a way that's visually structured so that the parents can understand, feel more engaged, and for the students as well. We're in high school, so they participate in their IEPs, and I really wanted to turn it into a collaborative meeting for all members, counselors included, and Gen Ed staff. And so we can kind of go through some of this and show you what it is and how we ended up landing on this. You know, after this meeting and speaking with the mom, she was able to just say like, "Thank you, I appreciate the explanations." And it's really taken me a long time, and it's been hard for me to understand the IEP process, and it is daunting. I will agree to that, and especially as a new student, I was in that same boat as her. Here you have a screenshot of what the IEP deck looks like. So what ended up happening was I looked at the UDLs. I tried to incorporate this. There was some staff that had a version of this that they were using to present IEPs. And so I really went in and tried to make it perfect it. And throughout the years, we've changed it, but the goal for it was to provide accessibility to the family. And it turned into this beautiful deck that is compliant. Okay, we've redefined it with our SPED director and our legal team to make sure that all parts of the IEP are met, that we are in compliance. We do our due diligence and we make sure to provide an IEP draft still, all of the good stuff. We check that off. But the deck itself is meant to lead the meeting and have it be more of a presentation and a discussion that doesn't feel as intimidating. And so you'll see here sort of what, one of my favorite things is kind of the design of it that I love that it feels inviting to families versus just printing out those long IEP documents that they're having to read and follow through that has words and maybe language that they are not familiar with. They don't see every day as like what we see it every day. Yeah.
Viviana, so thank you so much. We are actually going to use the next few minutes to kind of go through some elements of it. We're going to use like a question and answer um, exploration. So I'm going to pose some questions and Viviana is going to walk us through the answers. We're going to skip around a little bit, but we thought that might be an engaging modality for you all. So the first question I have for you, Viviana, is tell me about this picture. Do you really put a picture of the student there, or what is this? What happens
Yes.
here?
Yeah, usually we try to take pictures of fun things that we're doing. So Da Vinci is a project-based learning school. And so a lot of times kids are presenting, they're doing things with their hands. And so if we can catch a picture, we'll include that there for families to see like what their child has been up to. And sometimes we don't have them, but there's always Power School. So we take the picture and just add it on there so it feels personalized.
Yes, that is
I love that. Someone just called in and said, yes. I love the idea of a student in action, right? And that you try to find an artifact, right? And that really encapsulates universal design too. And it's so rare that a high school student is showing, is it like a parent is able to see their student in class at the high school level. So I think that's really lovely. And it sets a tone, right?
Yeah.
When the parent sees their student on the
It
first
always
slide.
makes them smile right from the get-go.
Oh, I love that. I don't, I think there's so many families like, that are not smiling.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of smiles at an IEP meeting, at least from the ones that I've been to recently. Okay, so thank you for that. And then we're going to move on. I had another question prepared for you. Um, let's see. This slide here, it's called, and it's the text is small and it's kind of in a grayscale. Can you talk about this slide right here, student engagement and participation, and what you say and what happens when
Yeah.
you're at this point in the meeting?
Yeah, this slide is meant to highlight really our way of working with the students and families on the IEP. At the high school level, we kind of have different expectations. Of course, all students lead and exit IEP, but in reality, we kind of take this moment to let parents know, like, we are here also to teach your student about what is their IEP, what's their eligibility. We're going to be talking about it often. They're going to have a say and a voice as we're writing their IEP. We want them to do that. We want them to feel empowered to participate. And so we invite them to every meeting and we highly, highly encourage them to attend. I think since I've been here, there's been only a number of IEPs where the student has not participated. And so we just take that moment to let them know that these are their rights. We want to encourage them to be there and that they will be exposed and they will learn what their eligibility is, how it impacts them. They'll have a say in developing their goals. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So I also see a connection to this first piece of well, one of these first big pieces of the agenda is starting with student strengths. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how this piece
Yeah.
right here specifically, like what the conversation sounds like and how you facilitate this part.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, so this slide deck has been redefined a few times. When I was hired here, my two colleagues, two other case managers, were also new. So the three of us started sort of at the same time. And, each one of us has added a few things and we've edited. And so we really wanted to make the start of our IEPs of sent a student focus. And so we opted to start with their strengths to make it feel like we really are here to honor the student, to work towards their progress. And the way that we write this typically is the case manager that writes the student's strengths based on our observations, but we always ask the student for input. Like, what do you consider as your strength? What would you like to share? And then we do offer the opportunity for everyone, all IP team members, to give some shout outs in the meeting live. And we ask parents, like, what would you consider any strengths that you'd like to highlight or that the team may not know, even if it's not academically related? And so it starts the meeting off in like a happy tone. We really want to make it student focused and strength based.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. I had there was something else that I thought was really unique and something that I haven't seen in sort of these accessible slide decks, which is this section right here where you have a quote, like this is a you wrote as a placeholder, this is a quote, words, of wisdom. Tell me about this part of the IEP.
Yeah, usually, I guess so usually it depends. Like I think every IEP kind of we use it to the students' needs. Sometimes the students have really great things that they want to say about themselves, and so we'll just put it right there. And then other times, uh, we also move with our caseloads here. So at our school, I've begun with my ninth graders. I moved up with them to 10th grade. And next year, I'll move up with them to 11th grade. And so I really like the idea that I get to know where they're growing and then I can highlight that. There's a lot of times that we're working on advocacy or we're working on collaboration. And so then we'll try to pull things from where we want to emphasize the growth and add that on here.
That's so, it's like a nice way of like as you're in the middle of the IEP, kind of zooming out to sort of like the point, like the why, right? And I think a lot about like this connection between theory and practice here in this moment. It's like, yeah, there's compliance pieces and there's like all of these different factors to think about in the IEP process, but this also is like a regrounding in like what is this about? It's like centering the student. And so it's like almost like a executive functioning like reminder, right? Like this is why we're here with this quote. Okay, I have a couple more questions
Yes.
as we dig into some of these slides that you prepared. And I kind of tried to reformat it so that they're bigger so our participants can see. So it looks like you go through the graduation requirements and so who is present and like how does this part of the conversation go as you are like talking about these graduation requirements and classes and credits? Can you tell me a little bit about who's speaking and how the tenor and the content of
Yeah.
this part of the meeting?
Ideally, we have the counselors present. Definitely, if they're a service provider, and so they will go through this. And so, the other pretty neat thing about the slide deck is that I can share it to the other team members. And so, I can just tag the counselor on here, ask for a grad check to make sure that we're not missing maybe any credits that need to be made up and that they're on track to graduate. And so, I will just tag the counselor on there. They help update this. And then everything that gets worked on in the deck, I transfer to SACE or to our program, whatever you may use for the IEP. Same thing for present levels. Like we tag the teacher on there, they go in and type their present levels, and then they facilitate this part. We will usually hand this section over to the counselor so that they can speak to it. And, parents always have questions about summer school or whatnot. And so it just gives everybody a voice in that moment for it to just flow. Like we already know what's coming up next, and we're all kind of working on this together. Yeah,
So it's
that.
like tip like in IEPs for high school, like usually this is at the end, right? Or maybe not, it's like glossed over a little bit, but I noticed that you put this before the present levels of performance
Yeah.
and the baseline data. And I'm just curious about the order. Did you have like a specific design in mind with that, or how did you think through that?
Because it leads right into the transition. And so
Okay, so
it
right after this, we do transition then.
yeah. And so we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is where we're at. This is where we're currently at. And then we're going to get
Mm-hmm.
into the details of it because so many questions come up after this. And so it's kind of like a setup. Like, yes, we will get to it. And we're going to come back to these grades. I think that the other intention, like, was sometimes our students are struggling. And so it feels discouraging when they have incompletes or classes they have to make up. And we leave that to the end and we just end on that note versus like, this is where we're at, but also let's discuss everything teachers have shared. Let's go through what we are going to need to work on. This is the goal. And so let's all unify so that if this doesn't look like what we want it to look like right now, we have a plan.
So, like, I really appreciate that you're thinking about universal design, not just in terms of like the layout and the font choices and the color, and it's like very sort of lowering the effective filter, but you're thinking about the design of the conversation, right? And I've like this idea that like the emotional tenor of the beginning mixed with the emotional like sort of responses at the end, like how do you structure the IEP in a way where you can like keep the engagement high through designing those pieces with so much intentionality. So I think that that's really nice, and it really makes me think of like UDL, like engaging all learners and in this case all participants. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so many IEPs, especially with the student there, there's like this sort of slumping and shutting
Yeah,
down that happens as you go through some of these topics of the
yeah,
IEP.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think I have one more question because what happens in your IEP template is that you start the transition plan by just introducing it. And I just apologize to everyone as I go ahead and scroll. This really felt like something new to me that I had not seen before. Do you mind
Mhm.
like kind of talking us through this piece that you added to your IEP agenda and
Yes.
your presentation?
So no IEP is perfect. We do our best, and sometimes we just can't get to everything. And so again, with the template, it's sort of scaffolded. So there will be times where we're, for whatever reasons, maybe like attendance, or we haven't been able to meet with the student, they've been absent, they maybe don't feel comfortable. We will bring this light up. It's usually like hidden, and so we don't see it, but it gives us a moment so that in the IEP, we could just have this open conversation and make sure we hit on all of these sections that would go into the transition plan, and we open it up for parents and students to answer. And we'll ask these questions, and so it really turns into a conversation of what are the plans? Parents, are you in agreement of this? Like, do you plan to have them living with you for the next 4 years after they graduate? Because a lot of times the kids will say, well, I'm going to live at home. And so they're like, I don't need to worry, right? But it kind of makes it more engaging where all of us are kind of talking about it. What do you do on your time off? Parents, how do you support? And so it's there so that if we need to jump into it or fix anything, we can reference these questions and like touch on these points. And we'll then revise that IEP and send out the new one. Yeah.
Nice.
And I'm going to talk more about transition in a
Yes,
few.
I'll switch to that so we have
Ah,
plenty of time for
it's a good,
Q&A.
yeah.
Yes, okay.
It's a good segue, but take a look at the slide deck, please, everybody. If you have ideas, suggestions, if you're doing some version of it, I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to continue revising this thing. But yeah, but that does
Oh, I
lead us.
had one more question. Is
Oh, yes.
that for parents and families that don't speak English, do you do a translated version of the
Yeah.
slides?
Yes,
Okay.
we'll do it in Spanish. And yeah, and so throughout the years, like now all three of the case managers speak Spanish. And so that kind of allows us just that naturally have it be more engaging, be able to communicate with the families. But we do translate it, and I know we also translate it onto SACE, just copy and paste, right? We like Google Translate it and add it on there because if you print it in Spanish, it just translates like the sections, the titles. It won't actually translate like the information that you put into it, and so. Yeah, we just go in and melody. And I know that it seems like it's maybe a lot more work to do it, but once you have the slide deck created, and usually over summer PD, either myself or a paraeducator creates like new decks. So we also change it up kind of every year. So it's not the same because we move up with our caseload. So they see this slide deck every meeting. And so we kind of try to change it up so that it's different. And once you have the template, it's a matter of whatever you would have put onto SACE, you copy and paste, and it's all there. It's all there. You don't really have to do anything extra to get it onto the slide deck. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have more for you guys as far as implementing UDL. And so I want to just talk about the transition piece, which is one of my favorite things to do with students in high school. I think it's so important for them to understand themselves and to see like the value of the IEP meetings and how it will serve them when they graduate. So when we do this transition piece, very much different than the elementary levels and even middle school. We try to focus it on the student voice. We try to teach them of their disability, like I mentioned before. So here at our school, we have a SAI class that's like a resource seminar twice a week. And it's a small group instruction, and we use this time to either deliver like an executive functioning lesson, college and career readiness lesson. Sometimes we're just going over accommodations, their eligibilities, and we give this survey to all of our students. And in the survey, there's many questions. We've redefined it as time has progressed. We've done trainings through our SELPA, great trainings where we've talked about executive functioning. And so we embedded some of those questions questions from their questionnaires to try to get an idea of the students' executive functioning skills. And especially in high school, it's so important. Most of the time when things don't get done, it comes down to this skill. And it's hard to get students to understand, well, this is a pattern I have, or this is the habit and whatnot. We follow it up with a one-to-one conference with the student because of that same reason. Sometimes their answers are very surface level. They say, I'm not in any clubs, and we know that they are. We know that they participate in other things. So the one-to-one conference allows us to kind of probe a little bit and ask them these questions, point out strengths, and get them to see that. And it's a way for us to prepare the students to be able to speak up in their IEP, to share parts of this section, to be able to voice, like, yeah, they did say that. And I do have these plans, and this is what I want to do. And I did identify that this is an area I want to work towards. And so we'll turn, a lot of the times we get goals from the students through this process. I'm like, what do you want to work on? Here's what I noticed, but does this feel like a goal that's appropriate for you? Here's what this teacher noticed. Like, are you feeling the same way? And I just love that part of it because, I don't think the students like it so much sometimes if I have snacks for them. But they learn so much about themselves. At the end of it, I'm like, was that so bad? And they get to like participate in the IEP because they've already done this with me. We've gone through it, we've previewed it. I also like to preview present levels. Sometimes for the students, present levels can seem like the teacher's saying all these bad things, or like, why would they bring that up? Things like that. And so I use this time to prime them and say, let's go through some of the things the teachers have said. Does this make sense to you? Do you feel like that's valid? Is it accurate? Sometimes they're like, no, no. And other times like, yeah, okay, I have, that has been happening. And then they also get to see the wonderful things teachers say. And so that makes them feel a little bit more encouraged to come to the IEP and to be there to hear it. Once, they act like, but they do get engaged and they're like, oh, I thought that teacher didn't like me. I hear that so many times. And so I love this part of it. Um, this is an example. I'm gonna try to talk. Yeah, we have time. This is an example of an IEP I did for last year of a student. And so using the survey and then our one-to-one conference, I'll read a little bit of what she shared. We divided into 3 categories. We're looking at the daily living, extracurricular skills, activities, and post-high school plans. So the student said, she shared that she finds waking up and getting dressed in the morning an easy part of her routine, but she doesn't always remember to brush her teeth. And waiting to leave is more challenging for her. She said at school, she independently puts away her belongings, charges her phone, checks her iPad, and works with her dad in his business. She also shared that she regularly completed chores at home. She gave some examples and she gave some of the ideas of what she does for her executive functioning. She said that she sets reminders and alarms to support her completion of an organization. And then she said that she felt comfortable and confident navigating the community. She walks to Starbucks after school. However, she reported lower confidence with social interactions. And an area that she would like to practice was cooking or cleaning at home and doing laundry. And so this was from the survey, and this was from our conversation that we were able to get this. I also want to highlight that for the student, she loves to read. In her extracurricular, she shared that she has written a book that's 110 pages and has 75,000 words. When this student started in 9th grade, she was very shy. What you see here is really her. She did not lie about anything. Now she's part of our ND club. She comes every week. She's participating in advisory slides and recording herself. Like, it has been an amazing growth that we have seen, but through this process, I developed a goal with her, and this the specifics I can't remember, but it was centered around her creating SMART goals for herself. And it was, I want to say, a time frame of a month. Small SMART goals format that she was going to track in reflection sheets. And we created a tracker for her, a daily tracker. And she came up with the goals with my support. So we kind of presented it as like, how could we improve our morning routine so we come to school more prepared, feeling more confident? And we first started with just like, let's set our clothes the night before. And then it turned into like, okay, now let's make sure you wash your face and brush your teeth. And we began to track that. And then it was like, okay, we got to a point where she was doing yoga in the morning before coming to school through just tracking. And I really was relying on parent input for this because I'm not there to see it, and her own reflections of it. Like, do you feel better? Does it feel like you are starting the morning off better? Like, she started reporting she was waking up maybe 10 minutes earlier, which was not a big difference, but somehow we were able to squeeze in a yoga stretch, the brushing of the teeth, and washing her face. And then we translated that to the education. Okay, now in school, what is a goal that you would like to work on? Just taking better notes. And we started to track that. And so I really love the progress that we were able to do. And a lot of it was not really focused on the academics as much as it was her executive functioning skills, and how that was able to translate to school. Yeah. I don't know if I had something else on that one. Yeah, I think that's it. But I hope that anything that we just shared gives you a glimpse into how creative you can get with UDL, and it doesn't need to be something so complicated. Just giving the student voice and giving the family voices and something like this so simple, the way that we facilitate the meetings, I think my team and I, we love doing it this way and it feels natural. And parents really do react well to it. They enjoy it. Um, and we make sure that at the end of it, we ask, have you facilitated the IEP and had your input and all the good stuff? And yeah, very proud of this. I hope that you guys take something away from this. And I think we have time for questions.
I would love to just like, it's hard for me not to just like give you so many flowers, Viviana, but going back to this connection between theory and practice, I'm just, listening to you present again, because, we rehearsed and now we're presenting again. It just really emphasizes to me like how you brought yourself, right? Like you brought your linguistic assets, you brought your like creative problem solving into the practices that that you sought to change. And it's really powerful. I mean, it's elegant. You said it's easy. It's not, not complex, but you did it. And it's small, but it moves the needle for families and clearly for students. And so I'm just really humbled to co-present with you and then deep appreciation of all your brilliance. So thank you.
And right back at you because I think really Alder, I will never speak badly about Alder. I love it. I encourage anyone that is considering going a credential to look at Alder. It really began from what we were reading and from having the ability to be in placement every day to be like, huh, I have this idea. And, having the whole team support that and say, like, launch this, do this, and see how you feel when you're presenting. It was amazing. And it stuck. 4 years later, we're still presenting this way.
Very cool. Anyone have any questions or would like to pose?
As we wait for questions to pop up in the chat, I had a question about um, as students go through this process with you, do some students feel empowered to kind of lead parts of the IEP meeting themselves? As a parent of a high schooler, I know that's the last thing he wants to do, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you might have some students who embrace that and take that leadership role.
Yeah, I think by the time that they're in their exit meetings, you see them like they're so nervous. A lot of times they don't want to be in the meeting. They think that it's going to be just saying negative things. Um, they love to include the pictures. Like that first slide, sometimes like they'll take ownership of it and they're like, you cannot put that picture. Let me give you some. Like, there's no way you're going to share that picture. I'm going to give you the ones I want you to share. And so it kind of does make it a little bit more fun and engaging. Again, I think the thing that helps the most is previewing what the goals are going to be and what the teachers have said. Because I've noticed that that's what causes them the most anxiety is like, this teacher, I'm failing. They're going to speak negatively. I don't want my parents to hear that, and I don't want to be there when that happens. And so once we've already kind of seen it, I'm like, you will have a chance to speak up and say, why is this grade this way? What's not working? What are your teachers doing that you could share in that meeting that helps you? Think of the best teacher you have. What do they do that you love? And share that to the team. And that kind of gives them that voice where it's like, okay, it's a safe space. I will be able to just speak about myself.
Well, and I think that we didn't talk about this, but you have a something on the top of every single slide when it comes to the present levels of performance, and it's this is on every single slide. Your voice matters. You see how our students learn, engage, and grow in ways that no one else does. And this is for the families, right? This is for
For the
family
teachers,
engagement.
and we yeah, for the teachers, and we leave that there to encourage them to really be transparent and to pay attention to our students. They are not just IEP students, they're Gen Ed students. And so um
Okay. This is
yes,
for the
so
general ed teachers,
for
and
the
it's a
Gen Ed
prompt for
teachers.
them to share more
Yes,
and be more participatory in the
yes,
meeting.
yeah.
Okay, nice.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
I love
almost
that. That
like,
was it.
yeah, go ahead, Megan.
I feel like that's a hidden part of this presentation. Like you're not only using UDL to like support your families and students, but also general education teachers who often report that they don't know what to say in an IEP meeting and feel very ill prepared. So I love that you're providing that front loading and sentence stem structures for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to make sure that we hit on like all of those parts, like something, just the visual of seeing it there makes them think like, oh yeah, I did notice when they were doing group work, this and that was happening. Because sometimes they're like, I don't know, they're shy, they're quiet or whatnot. Yeah.
How have you noticed family engagement shift as you've made this shift and evolve? So your students are more engaged in the process. Like, how have families responded?
Let's see. Well, I think definitely from the first year that I was here as a student teacher, and I've gotten to see some IEPs from like different districts because now everybody does our IEPs here like this. But I think that just participating in some IEPs where we're reading off of the IEP document, like it just feels so impersonal. When we go through all the IEP deck, I think some of the families I've seen it benefit the most is like our low income, low resource families. When it's kind of scaffolded and already bullet points, they prefer to follow that along. We always provide the actual IEP in the meeting printed and then the printed slide deck. And so they always prefer to follow with the slide deck because it's more accessible. They can like just look at the bullet points. It's kind of color coded for them. It's easy to pinpoint like what section we're talking about. Even though we're in high school, like I never want to assume that they have had the experience of having someone thoroughly walk them through it or that they understand all sections. And so then this way, they're able to follow through and they also jot down their notes right on that slide, like right next to the slide, they'll put down their notes or questions that they'll get back to. And so that's the way that I've seen it be able to get their engagement and give them something that they're looking at, a visual and an artifact that they could take with them afterwards. Like this was the meeting that we had. Yeah.
Well, and I love to, I mean, it's to me, it seems like it so represents more like the social model of disability, right? Like our legally mandated IEP forms are very clinical.
Yeah.
And they're in tiny 4-point font,
Yes.
right? That is
Yes.
really hard to read. And I think this is so much more engaging and just really thoughtfully designed. And just as a fellow former teacher and also just as a parent who has sat on the parent side of this table, right? Like I just really appreciate how you and your colleagues are evolving this process, right? And really thinking about how do we engage our specific age group of students And because, high school is such a unique time, like you're getting kids in freshman year of high school who've never been actually told they have a disability, right?
Yeah,
Like, and so
I
they're
have heard
having
that
to do
more
all
often
this
than not.
yeah, all this self-discovery and what's my identity. And then I also think, I appreciate that you mentioned like you don't make the assumption that a parent has been walked through this process. And I think it's so easy in high school to make that assumption that people have. And so I really want to celebrate you for not making that assumption. My husband is a PhD scientist, and when we first did my son's IEP in third grade, at the end of the 2 hours, he walked out and said, "What was that all about?
What
What
were
did
we
what
talking
did
about?
you just make me sign?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Didn't you
And
follow?" He's like, "No, I didn't understand anything you all said." And I was
yeah.
like,
Yeah. I
"Okay,
get that.
yeah." I wanted to elevate
Thank
a
you.
comment here in the chat. It says, I'm glad to see how teachers are encouraged to share during IEP meetings. In my experience, sometimes teachers are mostly quiet. And it's not because they're shy or don't know what to say, it's because they've been told not to speak. So thank you for offering that
Yeah.
transparency for your teachers. And
Yeah.
that there's so much love in the chat for your presentation template as a resource and tool.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to close us out here. And I'm so incredibly grateful to both of you, Eileen and Viviana, for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your experiences to help all of us grow and be better. I wrote down two quotes here from you, Viviana, of like, this process doesn't feel genuine. So there has to be a better way. And so I think, SIP as a team really believes in innovation and how the innovation has to come from each of us
Yeah.
to make this system more equitable for all of our students. So thank you for doing that and for iterating it and for sharing it so graciously with all of us today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Ivins. Thank you, Viviana, for your time.